Teleporters, all hands back at battle station.
Broadcasting live on the UnitedWest.org AM radio network and simulcasting on DirecTV, iHeartRadio, Roku, and the World Wide Web, this is Enemies of the State with Tom Trento.
Hello, everyone. This is J. Mark Campbell filling in for Tom Trento while he's away in Israel. And we have a fantastic show for you today. We have a special guest, Frank Gaffney, head of Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C., who is also former Undersecretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan. And he and Glenn Beck have worked together to expose a major figure in the Republican Party who is working as a Muslim Brotherhood agent inside the Republican Party for years, for decades. And Glenn Beck, if you watched his show last night, and we'll show you a portion of that show last night, exposing Grover Norquist and his major Muslim Brotherhood ties to terrorists, to agent provocateurs, and his association and influence operations with terrorists and Muslim Brotherhood agents. This is amazing, folks. This is an amazing story. So without further ado, let me bring on Frank Gaffney. How are you doing, Frank?
I'm very well. I'm delighted to be with you, Mark, and I'm very pleased that we, I think, had a very important day yesterday with Glenn Beck's program. And I gather what he's been talking about in the course of today as well, and I understand will do so further with the guy who's sort of at the center of the controversy, Grover Norquist, on his program later today as well.
Well, let's get right to it. My first question to you, Frank, is what is the impetus behind this whole event of actually starting? Obviously, you've had this information out there for years, and all of a sudden it's coming to fruition. Can you explain what's happened? As
you say, Mark, I have been trying to raise an alarm about what Grover Norquist has been doing for the better part of 16 or 17 years now, in various ways and with varying degrees of success, quite frankly. The essence of which is that I personally witnessed him using his offices in Washington, D.C. to host and enable Muslim Brotherhood influence operations against our government, most especially the Bush administration, actually starting with the Bush 2000 campaign, and the Republican Party and conservative movement during that period and ever since. And why this is coming to a head at the moment is that Glenn Beck, when he learned that Grover Norquist, having studied up quite a bit on what he had been doing and my admonitions and others, when he learned that Grover Norquist was standing for re-election to the board of the National Rifle Association, the NRA, an organization with which Glenn had been associated for many years, as he pointed out in a radio program with me, he had not only been a great admirer of the organization, a member, and worked with it, but had raised millions of dollars for it. Well, when he learned that Grover was in the re-election mode to the board, he said, I'm not sure that I will be able to continue my association with the NRA if he is re-elected. Well, that apparently unleashed, according to Glenn, hundreds and hundreds of phone calls to the NRA from irate members expressing their opposition to Grover Norquist's continued involvement with their organization because they had been learning about what he had been doing, most especially, as I say, in league with now convicted jihadists serving hard time in federal prison, or who have in the past, and others who have not actually been prosecuted, but who nonetheless are closely tied to Muslim Brotherhood front organizations, causes, agendas, and so on. And when these folks lit up the phones, you might say melted down the switchboard of the NRA,
Good.
Wayne LaPierre, the executive vice president of that organization, called Glenn Beck and had apparently an hour-long conversation with him in which, among other things, Mr. LaPierre promised to conduct an open and transparent ethics investigation of Grover Norquist on the part of the NRA. So I think what has basically happened is a lot of people are now focusing on what I've been urging them to think about for quite some time, with Glenn Beck's very considerable help, and subsequently, most recently yesterday, his hour-long special, which really walked you through the nature of these relationships and their implications. This thing is now very much where I think it should have been years ago, in the public eye.
One of the things that did not get explained last night on the hour-long special was how deep Grover is into all these various organizations. It's not just the NRA, it's not just the ACU, and it's not just, a few boards. He actually places a lot of people in some very significant positions. And please explain to people how dangerous this man is as far as his influence is inside the Republican Party and in the White House and today's politics, even in the nomination of presidential candidates.
Grover Norquist has, over the years, developed quite a prominent role in Republican and conservative circles, mostly in connection with his advocacy of lower taxes and so-called no new taxes pledge that he's had large numbers of politicians at both the federal and local and state levels sign on to. That, as far as I'm concerned, is unobjectionable. The problem has been he's had this sideline, and what his sideline has entailed, and you don't have to take my word for it, there's actually a video clip of Grover saying this himself in the company of radical leftists and Islamists at something called the National Leadership Council meeting in October of 2011. It can be found, and by the way, I commend to your audience, Mark, an online course that we've produced, which features prominently Grover and his influence operations. But in part 7 of this course, I don't remember exactly where, but I think it's about midway through, there is a clip from this conference in which Grover Norquist describes very explicitly how he used his access to what he calls a senior Republican senator, a leader, the purpose of which was obviously to talk with him about whatever his agenda was, as he calls it. I assume that was mostly the lower taxes or other political initiatives. But what he says is he concluded by asking whether the senator would be willing to meet with Muslim leaders.
Well, we have that clip, Frank. Let's go ahead and play it.
Right here? One sec. No, I hesitated because I wasn't sure if I could tell this story without quite IDing the guy it was about. But I went to talk to a U.S. senator leader, and I said, I have 7 projects I'm working on, and I said one of them was, would you like to meet with Muslim leaders to talk about issues of concern to the community? And he said, oh, I don't know. I don't think anybody in my town, state, is comfortable with the Nation of Islam stuff. And anyway, so, okay, next. A year later, I came back, I got 8 issues I'm working on, would you be interested in meeting with Muslim leaders? I said, oh yes, we have 70 interns at the state university, the internship's named after me, and they were visiting, and 3 of them were women in cover, and the head of our state university is an Arab American, I'd love to. All of a sudden, he discovered that there were people in his state that he didn't know about.
Let's listen to that last bit again.
All of a sudden, he discovered that there were people in his state that he didn't know about.
What is unmistakably captured in those last couple of seconds is Grover Norquist choking up as he recounts how the unnamed Senate leader connected with Muslims in his constituency.
Unfortunately, Frank, the Muslims he's getting all choked up about are Muslim Brotherhood agents and terrorists.
Well, Muslim leaders in Grover Norquist's world means exclusively Muslim Brotherhood operatives and organizational representatives. The way you know that is because some of them have been convicted in federal court for their ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and even Al-Qaeda in one case, or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another designated terrorist organization, or they're organizations that have been, again, identified by the federal government in the Holy Land Foundation trial as Muslim Brotherhood fronts. The other reason you know this is because the Muslim Brothers won't play with anybody else. They won't let any other Muslims, non-Islamists, non-Islamic supremacists like them, into meetings that they have any control over or are able to set up, as was done with Grover Norquist's help. Anyway, the point is that in this clip, you see him saying how the senator initially demurred, so he came back a year later and did it again. And under different circumstances, the senator said, oh, yes, I'd be delighted to meet with these Muslim leaders. The point is his access to not just senators, but to governors. I learned last week that he had personally upbraided Governor Bobby Jindal of Louisiana on two different occasions, one for espousing the rebuilding of the United States military, an activity that I think most conservatives recognize as not only vital to our national security, but an important part of our brand. Well, not for Grover. He didn't want the governor to be associated with a 4% of gross domestic product commitment to national defense and rebuilding our military. And then more recently, when Bobby Jindal went to London and spoke to the Henry Jackson Society about the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, as he puts it, and made the observation that a religion, this is a pretty close paraphrase, if not a verbatim quote, a religion that condones violence against other religions isn't a religion, it is a terrorist organization. Well, apparently, Grover Norquist called Bobby Jindal and read him the Riot Act about that kind of statement and insisted that he back away from it. So this isn't just ancient history. This isn't something that is interesting and deeply troubling in terms of the influence that Norquist and his influence operation on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood had on George W. Bush at a critical moment, particularly at the very beginning of this phase of what I think of as the war for the free world, what the president called the war on terrorism, namely 9/11 and its immediate aftermath. But this, unfortunately, is an ongoing problem. And I think the fact that it's taking place at the highest levels of the United States government and the Republican Party, a prospective presidential candidate, is illustrative of what he's doing more broadly and what he needs to be held accountable for. And thank God for Glenn Beck and his team helping us to do that.
Well, that leads me to another question. One is, why hasn't the mainstream media picked up on something? Like you said, you've been hammering this subject for 13, 16 years. And,
about 15, I think.
15. And we've been hammering it for years ourselves. Why haven't they picked it up? And is it just because of the Karl Rove influence? And also explain the Karl Rove influence for people too, because it's pretty damning. You know, his friendship, his relationship with Karl Rove, and the $26 million that Karl has given to Grover's organizations. Can you explain a little bit?
Well, this goes back to when they were in college Republicans together and formed, I think, a friendship that continues to this day. I have personally warned Karl Rove, both when he was in the White House and subsequently, about Grover's activities on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood. He famously said to the Wall Street Journal in a piece that appeared on its front page back in, I think, 2003, that there's no there with respect to my charges on Grover's activities and his efforts to influence and really subvert the Bush administration. But you refer to something that was very troubling to me that happened in the last election cycle. Carl, of course, is the, I guess the grand poobah of an organization called American Crossroads. And it garnered, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars, as I understand it, from Republican donors who foolishly, in my opinion, turned the money over to Carl to dispense as he saw fit. A lot of it seems to have migrated into his own pocket or the pockets of his friends in the media, advertising, selling business and the like, the consultant class, if you will. But apparently, and I've heard various numbers, Mark, 26 million is at the low end.
Yes.
By some estimates, it was considerably higher than that. But whatever the number was, an enormous amount of money was given for what I understand is being described as social welfare activities to Grover Norquist's Americans for Tax Reform, and dispensed by him to who knows who. My sense is some of it must have gone to conservative leaders and organizations, presumably for the purpose of getting out the vote or helping sell Mitt Romney or for whatever other reason. But one reason why we haven't heard more from the conservative movement leadership, I have the feeling, is not only a sense that Grover is one of theirs and an important leader in this circle, but probably also because he's doling out money to some of them, at least. But beyond that, the question really occurs. Are the mainstream media giving him a pass out of some sense of either affinity for what he's doing or fear that there'll be retribution against them? I don't know, to be honest with you. But one of the things that we hear all the time, and that I'm sure Glenn will be treated to if Grover does indeed show up today, is that, the press has actually investigated all of these charges endlessly and continues to come up with the conclusion that there's nothing there, as a prominent conservative by the name of Cleta Mitchell did when she really dissembled to the American Conservative Union Board. I don't know where the extent of Grover's influence with the mainstream media lies, but I can tell you this. The first serious public investigation of Grover Norquist's activities on behalf of enemies of our country has been done by Glenn Beck. And I salute him for doing it. And I'm particularly appreciative of something that he made a point of several times in yesterday's program. And that is, this doesn't have anything to do with me.
Right.
Grover would have everybody believe this is just a personal thing, or I'm stalking him, or this is a vendetta, or rubbish.
Yep.
Utter rubbish. And Glenn made that point by not only drawing on a host of sources, which, by the way, people can find a handy compendium of at our site, securefreedom.org. It's called Agent of Influence, Grover Norquist and the Assault on the Right.
Yes.
The specific current edition is subtitled Targeting the NRA. I commend it to everybody. But what that document makes clear is anybody looking carefully at this question will find abundant evidence from, including some mainstream sources, but others who have been reporting and investigating and analyzing this situation. Hardly any of it comes from me. And wherever people do serious investigations, serious homework on Norquist and his activities, they come to the same very damning conclusion that Glenn Beck has, and that is that he is, in fact, at the very best, somebody who has been incredibly unlucky and naive, but frankly, I think he's concluded rightly, is a knowing, witting, and active enabler of the Muslim Brotherhood's operations in America.
Yeah, I know your time is very, very, very limited here, Frank. Real quick, Ted Cruz, does he get it or does he not get it? He just announced for president. Does he understand this whole Grover Norquist thing?
I have had a chance to speak to him about it. I think he's taken it aboard. He's a very smart guy. I have no idea how carefully he's had a chance to look into it personally, but I think that because he is so sensible and because, among other things, he's very alive, as is Governor Jindal, to this insidious Sharia in effort here in the United States, the civilization jihad, as the Muslim Brotherhood calls it, not just the violent kind that's taking place elsewhere. I'm reasonably sure he's pretty squared away on that too.
All right, thank you, Frank. I appreciate you for coming on the show, and
my pleasure.
And we'll see you again later.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Mark.
I am just really excited that Frank Gaffney is finally getting his vindication, if you will, for all his years' work. He's been called everything from a racist to a hater to an Islamophobe to you name it. He's been called it. But he's stuck to the truth. He's kept to the truth. He's kept to the facts. He's just put the facts out there doggedly day after day after day for years. And you got to take your hats off to someone like that. You really, really do. But what I'm going to do now is play for you a little bit of the Glenn Beck show last night, because he lays it out much better than I can. So let me play you a little bit of the Glenn Beck show, and here we go.
For decades, one man has quietly been the driving force behind the Republican Party. He built a lobbying empire too big to be ignored in the Beltway. And in recent years, he has become famous for what many call his tax purity pledge, which 96% of all Republicans sign. Anyone who strays from the pledge can count on feeling the wrath of Grover Norquist during their re-election. But taxes are the least of the concerns surrounding Norquist. His alarming ties with groups hostile to America, who seek to destroy it from the inside out. Those are the things that should worry every American. Tomorrow, we let the man speak for himself, an interview you won't want to miss. But tonight, the facts. Grover's connections. Now. Hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck program and to The Blaze. This is the network that you are building. Tonight is a very important show, as is tomorrow night, when Grover Norquist will be joining us here on the set. There are no rules to that interview. We have made it very clear. I'm not out to get anybody. I just would like an answer to a few things that have been going around for a very, very long time, and he's the only one with an answer. Anytime anybody tries to ask him, they always are just shouted down that they are racist. That doesn't cut it here. There are many who claim that Grover Norquist is really kind of the right's version of George Soros without all the money. He is really a power player who has managed to use his influence to evade any real scrutiny over his dangerous connections. That's why tonight and tomorrow's show are necessary. Politicians listen to him. Many obey him. He has a long list of connections with radical Islamic organizations and, in some cases, actual terrorists. Others, not just Frank Gaffney, who was on my program, radio program, and we're not including Frank Gaffney on this program tonight because we went and did our own homework. We wanted to find out ourselves. We called people ourselves. We did our own homework. There's a lot of questions. People have been ringing the warning bell for quite some time. And honestly, I used to do a bit on radio back in the Bush days because I didn't even know who Grover Norquist was. And I was like, oh, yeah, Super Grover. Used to do that all the time. I mocked the claims. But where there's smoke, there's usually fire, and we decided to look into it ourselves. We did a couple of years ago, but it didn't seem as pressing then. As we look into it here lately, you're about to see the facts from that research, and you tell me if this is a pressing issue or not. Nobody else in the media is willing to take this seriously. But I will tell you, our sources are not only named sources that we will tell you about. They are the sources of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, the The Nation in some cases, MSNBC in some cases. Tonight we're going to lay out the facts and the claims. I want you to understand, and I know Grover is watching tonight, this show is not personal. I don't know the man at all. I'm not going to try to figure out why he's doing this. I don't know. The only thing I used to know about him was he's great on low taxes. He believes in small government and the free market. I'm good with that. I don't like the fact that he's also on board with immigration reform and amnesty. But those are political opinions. Those are policy differences. I'm not going to go and do a whole show like this about policy differences. This is about national security. This is a danger to you, your family, and the republic. If you saw the route last week, you know that all violent jihad stems today from the Muslim Brotherhood. No matter what the Obama administration is saying, you know the truth about the Muslim Brotherhood. In 2012, we did a Blaze documentary reporting on something called The Project. It featured documents that were uncovered in an FBI raid of the Holy Land Foundation. They were plans to destroy the civilization of America. How? By using Muslim Brotherhood front groups and building secret leadership right here on American soil in the form of a series of front organizations for the Brotherhood, including ISNA, CARE, the Muslim American Society, the American Muslim Council, just to name a few. And then they were going to try to find politicians and influencers to be able to influence our culture, our government, and our society. It's happening, whether we like to admit it or not. For a limited time, we're going to make this documentary available on demand at theblaze.com/theproject for free. You'll be able to watch that. It's really important that you understand that and the next two shows. Also, we are going to re-air that program this Friday from 8 to 11. I suggest that you have your friends and neighbors watch that program. Also, watch this program and tomorrow night's episode with Grover Norquist. One of the problems with this is there's a lot of names and different organizations, and just like it was difficult to talk to you about Soros or the Tides Foundation, this is difficult. We have to go to the chalkboard for this, because the more buffers you put in place, the more circuitous routes you use, the messier it all gets, and it's hard to follow some of the trails. The connections go much, much deeper than we're able to show you in a single hour. But I think we have enough here for you to say, there's something very bad I need to hear from Grover Norquist himself. So let's start at the chalkboard with, who is this guy? Well, first of all, we know that he's a Harvard grad. He's really, really quite brilliant. He's politically minded, wanted to be in politics since he was a youth. Even though he believes in the small business and the free market, he has no private sector experience at all. And he was the co-architect of the Bush wins. He led Muslim outreach after 9/11 with Bush. He has weekly D.C. meetings with the top conservatives because he wields an awful lot of power. He is very, very influential. He also founded something called the American Tax Reform Institute in 1985. This is where you get the pledge, that tax pledge that is signed by most Republicans. He is the guy who has really bulldozed and helped get George W. Bush elected in 1999, and he is big on outreach. Now, what has he done? Well, he is extremely influential in the GOP circles, and the important thing is to know where the money goes, so does Norquist. With the cost of winning elections skyrocketing, it makes him extremely important. So people play ball with him. So what has he created? Well, we know he's created this foundation, and this is really important. About 90% of all Republicans sign his tax pledge, and it's a good thing. But he's also created this, the Islamic Institute, which is trying to support the free market within Islam. That's a good goal, until you start to see how this thing has come together. If this was really about the free market, And perhaps it is. You have to be the judge. I find it very difficult, and I think in the next 15 minutes, you're going to find it very difficult to believe. But if this was really about the free market over in the Middle East, that's a fantastic goal. There's nothing wrong with that. But then we get to his friends, the people he trusts. Now, first on the list, Karl Rove. Karl Rove gave him $26 million to his tax organization in 2012, and here it is, for something called social welfare. $26 million from Karl Rove and the Koch brothers. The other donor, the Koch brothers, they are the primary funders of Norquist's budget for this. Okay, is that a good thing? Sure, all right, whatever. Because even if you are on the left and you want really high taxes, there's nothing seemingly nefarious going on here. Okay. Because of this, he holds those high-profile conservative groups in his hands, and he threatens his power to campaign against anybody who doesn't play by his rules. But what other alliances is he making? Let me show you some of the people that he's been working with and crossing paths with. This guy is extremely disturbing. Al-Amoudi, you might have heard his name before. He was once held up as a moderate Muslim. He founded the Islamic Society of Boston Mosque in 1981, and that is the mosque, I don't think I have, yeah, that is the mosque that these guys came from. You know, the radical marathon bombers. In 1993, after the World Trade Center bombing, he campaigned on behalf of Mohammed Salameh, who was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. In 1994, Al-Amoudi also denied that he was a terrorist, that Hamas was a terrorist organization. I want you to watch this.
I am sure that the United States of America and Israel will come to terms with Hamas. What I don't agree with you, that you show these names, Muhammad this, and then you say, these people were training people to do fire bombs, to train for this, and you don't show any of that evidence.
Mr. Al-Amoudi, is Hamas a terrorist group?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's not a terrorist group. 2 years later, he was caught talking about the destruction of America. Watch.
And I think if we are outside this country, we can say, oh, Allah destroyed America. But once we are here, our mission in this country is to change. You can be violent anywhere else but in America.
Got it? So once you're here, you can't say those things. He declared support for radical Hamas leader Marzouk, saying, and I quote, "I have known Musa Abu Marzouk before, and I really consider him to be among some of the best people in the Islamic movement." Feds caught him expressing frustration that no Americans died in 1998 in the U.S. Embassy bombing in Kenya. He recommended more operations be conducted there. In 2000, he stood across from the White House voicing support for terrorist organizations Hamas and Hezbollah. Watch.
I have been labeled by the media in New York to be a supporter of Hamas. Anybody support this Hamas here? Anybody is a supporter of Hamas here? Anybody is a supporter of Hamas here? Hear that, Bill Clinton? We are all supporters of Hamas. Allahu Akbar.
Allah Akbar.
I wish they added that I'm also a supporter of Hezbollah. Anybody supports Hezbollah here? Anybody supports Hezbollah here? Takbir! Takbir!
Got it? This guy was finally arrested at Heathrow Airport with $340,000 in cash that was given to him by Muammar Gaddafi. The plot involved al-Qaeda operatives. He was a senior al-Qaeda financier. He funneled at least $1 million directly to al-Qaeda. He was sentenced in 2004. He's serving a 23-year prison sentence for terrorist fundraising related to the plan to assassinate the Saudi Crown Prince Abdullah. So, people he trusts. Al-Amoudi. You'll see the connections as we go on. Now, the next one on the board is Khalid Safuri. Who is that? Well, he is Al-Amoudi's right-hand man. He was a deputy at the American Muslim Council, one of the Brotherhood front organizations. He was founder of the Islamic Institute. He was very influential in the Bush administration. He led talks with the administration in opposition of Operation Green Quest, which we'll talk a little bit about later. That was basically trying to go get the front groups. He didn't want that to happen. Karl Rove tapped him for Muslim outreach. He voiced displeasure after the decision to shut down the Holy Land Foundation for funding Hamas. So after the trial, and they were proven to be a terrorist front group, he was upset at that decision. Then we go to Sami Al-Arian. I think everybody pretty much knows who he is. Former member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Former professor at USF. Campaigned against secret evidence method. He was caught soliciting donations for a Palestinian terrorist to kill an Israeli Jew. He paid respects to, quote, the March of the Martyrs and to the river of blood that gushes forth and does not extinguish. I don't know about you, but I want to hang out with him. He also said, let us damn America to death. Watch this. Let us damn America, let us damn Israel, let us damn their allies until death. Why do we stop? He was convicted of funding Palestinian Islamic Jihad. He has been sentenced to 57 months in prison. So the right-hand man also in jail. People that Grover Norquist trusts. Next guy on the list that we have, Sami Al-Arian. This one is Jamal al-Barzinji. He is the founder, the founding father. He's the George Washington of the Muslim Brotherhood of the U.S. He played a crucial role in creating and organizing the web of Brotherhood front groups that followed ISNA, Muslim American Society, IIIT. He founded the Radical Mosque in Virginia. He's known for ties to Islamic terrorists from Hamas to Al-Qaeda. He's officer of SAR Foundation, which is suspected of funding terrorist groups. Then we go to Suhail Khan. Suhail Khan is probably the cleanest of Grover Norquist's friends. He campaigned against the DOJ's secret evidence. His parents are really the trouble spot. They were prominent leaders in the Brotherhood front groups. At the annual award at ISNA, it is given every year in his father's name. The mosque, founded by his dad, hosted the Blind Sheikh just a couple of months before he bombed the World Trade Center. He has a network of terror-friendly organizations, and he made it possible for Osama bin Laden's number 2, al-Zawahiri, to actually covertly visit the United States undetected in 1995. He played a key role in founding CARE. He was praised by Al-Amoudi at an award ceremony. Watch this.
I'm really proud to be with Suhail Khan. Some of you saw him today in the White House, but inshallah soon you'll see him in better places in the White House, inshallah. Maybe sometimes as vice president soon, inshallah.
Okay, wouldn't that be great? So you remember, this is this guy praising this guy who was working at the White House because of Grover Norquist. I don't know what Grover's motivations are for working with people that range from Muslim Brotherhood sympathizer all the way to full-blown terrorists. It can only be one of two things. He is the most unlucky and naive guy next to the President of the United States. And I hope it's that, because the only other option is that he strongly agrees enough with the Muslim Brotherhood's mission, or they're just paying him enough cash to subvert America. Either way, somebody with this much power inside the Republican Party and inside the NRA with these connections is absolutely unacceptable. No person with any shred of integrity whatsoever would be within the same zip code of some of these people, let alone at the same office or exchanging money with them. And so far, the explanations given for the connections are completely unacceptable as well. So, next we're going to go to the groups that these guys have founded. Who are these people? What have they founded? And is there any connection to the Muslim Brotherhood? Are they trying to secretly destroy civilization in America? Back in a minute.
I think it's important to look at the relationships Grover Norquist has, because he has actually admitted that he has opened doors with the Republican members of Congress and the Senate in particular for what he refers to as senior Muslim leaders. They're all tied with the Muslim Brotherhood in North America. The Al-Amoudi connection is what really jumped out with me. Mr. Al-Amoudi actually gave or loaned Grover Norquist a total of about $20,000 to launch a project called the Islamic Free Market Initiative. Al-Amoudi has been very active in the North American Muslim Brotherhood. Mr. Al-Amoudi was also the founder, is known as the founder of the Muslim chaplain program within the Department of Defense. To have somebody who is connected with terrorism, connected with the Department of Defense, who's literally in prison right now, and to have him tied early on with Grover Norquist in a material way, that was the biggest red flag.
We just received an email. No conservative should have to pay Glenn Beck to hear a grown-up response to Frank Gaffney's nonsense. 2 weeks ago, March 11th, Glenn had Frank Gaffney on his radio show for a lengthy interview in front of an audience of 7 million Americans. It's actually 8. Uncritically accepting Gaffney's 10 to 15-year-old nonsense, Glenn kept saying over and over, Grover was a dangerous and bad man. On the free public airwaves in front of 7 million people, 8, Glenn repeated Gaffney's long discredited nonsense over the course of several shows, never checking anything. Absolutely untrue. Never reaching out to us for a reality check. Absolutely untrue. And then, after repeating stuff from Gaffney over and over the public airwaves, you invite Grover to a paid subscription-only show with a different, much smaller audience. If you are now interested in the facts that dozens of reporters and most conservative leaders already know, the best way would to proceed to hash through Gaffney's attacks in front of the audience, where Glenn gave Gaffney plenty of time to present them. If you're serious about doing fact-checking of this material, contact me in a time to find a time to do something on the radio show, the same venue where Gaffney told his conspiracy theory. So, after a week of many emails, including the one that came in earlier, I think this morning, got it, Tiffany, would it be possible to get a transcript of Wednesday's 1-hour Grover special? It would help with focus. And one that went out this afternoon reminding him that we can arrange transportation for the interview time tomorrow, and the one that went out 2 days ago that talked about we will examine the concerns. This one went out at 11 on March 24th. Is that today? Yesterday at 11 o'clock in the morning. Grover and Beck will air the full hour without any additional guests on Glenn's TV show. Great, that'll work. Confirming the taping time on this end. Blah, 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 blah. Grover, and I knew this would happen, has no interest in coming on the show now. Grover, if you're not man enough to look another man in the eye, and by the way, if you have a problem with it being paid, I will make this episode free. It was my intent to do so in rerun anyway, so it will be free tomorrow to anybody who wants to see your response. Believe me, the listeners on the radio would love to look you in the eye to see if you can help us with some of this. For instance, we've seen the power that he has. We've seen the groups that he's done. We see the people that he trusts, right? We have seen that he has worked with, funded, and crossed paths with these people, and they have crossed paths with him. He is the outreach to the Muslim community. But now let me show you where their paths have intersected, because it's a Soros-esque tangled web of front groups and organizations. But they share one thing in common, the core values of the Muslim Brotherhood. In 1998, Norquist funded the Islamic Institute. He said the group wasn't political and instead promoted the beliefs of the Quran's teachings that don't conflict with a free society. I don't know how many Islamic women would agree with that claim, but it's a noble goal. Great. He had financial help starting this up from a convicted Islamic terrorist, Al-Moody. There's the copy of the check. The convicted terrorist gave him $20,000 to get the Islamic Institute up and running. The Islamic Institute's president and co-founder, the right-hand man for al-Amoudi, the co-founder. It was this group that organized the rally against Israel and the Israeli aggression. They protested in front of the White House. So it was this group that funded this, where they were recorded loudly voicing support for Hamas and Hezbollah, both designated terrorist organizations. Months after al-Amoudi said that, we're all supporters of Hamas across the street from the White House, Norquist went to work right away. He facilitated a high-level meeting with al-Amoudi with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Funding began to pour in, mostly from overseas. 80% of that funding for his organizations comes from countries like Qatar. It was funneled around between all the shell groups, and the government was zeroing in with something called Operation Green Quest, which was designated to find and put a stop to overseas terror financing. Norquist lobbied hard to have the operation shut down. He was unsuccessful. Norquist's group accepted $20,000 from the now defunct SAR, which was shut down because it raised and laundered money for Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It was also funded by another front group, SAFA. Norquist helped steer SAFA funding to GOP candidates and elected officials. But SAFA was also raided in 2002 under suspicion of being financially aiding the terrorists. Norquist was also the founder of Janus Merit Strategies. One of his clients? al-Amoudi, who paid $40,000 for representation. Now, Norquist, we know, denies this claim, saying it was a housekeeping slip-up. It was a guy named this guy, not this guy. This guy was later named in a search warrant affidavit as the director of a group entities controlled by individuals who have shown support for terrorist or terrorist fronts. Now, again, like I said, either Norquist has the worst luck ever, or there's a pattern here. Why are there so many people with ties to terrorism doing business with him? Another connection, Sami al-Arian, who, as you recall, convicted of providing material support to Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Norquist played a key role in arranging meetings, introducing power players to Sami al-Arian, including George W. Bush. Norquist and al-Arian worked together to fight the administration on the use of secret evidence. Al-Arian visited Norquist's office in 2002, a meeting they now dismiss as just trading literature. And who doesn't do that? People stop by all the time, and they'll give me something from the Bronte sisters or some Twain. It happens all the time. I understand that. Norquist also received an award from al-Arian himself for being a champion to fight against the use of secret evidence. Suhail Khan is an officer at the Islamic Institute, spoke at ISNA alongside Jamal, whatever his name is. Khan now denies everything, even the existence of the Muslim Brotherhood in the U.S., and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. I just want to show you, this is what these guys have started. Crossroads Center to Protect Patient Rights is the Koch brothers. Do they have any Muslim Brotherhood ties? Nope and nope. Al-Amoudi, the founding member of American Muslim Council, American Muslim Foundation, and Islamic Society of Boston. Ties to Muslim Brotherhood? Yes, yes, yes. Khalid Safuri is on the part of Department of American Muslim Council and the Free Market Islamic Society. We'll come back to that because he was the co-founder of Grover Norquist's group. We'll come back. Is there any ties to the American Muslim Council? Yes, to the Muslim Brotherhood. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a front group for the Muslim Brotherhood. A member of the Muslim Brotherhood, so I'd say that's probably connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. Founding member, the last guy here, Jamal al-Barzinski, or whatever his name is, it was a founding member of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood. Also ISNA, Muslim Student Association, Muslim American Society, and IIIT, all of them front groups. So, is the Islamic Institute a front group for the Muslim Brotherhood? Seeing that all of these guys, including one of the founding members, is a part of other front groups, I would have to say the Free Market Islamic Institute probably is a front group for the Muslim Brotherhood. But you'll have to decide. I don't think Crossroads is, and I don't think the Koch brothers are. These guys are definitely involved. Is he? Boy, if he's not, he should probably check everything, because all of the people involved with it are. This alone should warrant a straight answer. Maybe that's why Grover has just denied coming on the show, even though he said yesterday and the day before and even earlier today that he would be here. How could you possibly be mixed up with so many radical extremists whose mission is to subvert the United States of America and fund Islamic jihad? I'm not claiming that he's a secret Muslim. I'm not claiming that he wants to destroy America. All I'm claiming are the facts. This is who he is. This is what he's founded. He's founded it with the help of these people. They're connected to these groups. These groups are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. That's what I'm claiming. The most despicable human beings on the planet, like Alamoudi, seems to be a pattern. How would he explain that? So far, all we've seen is mudslinging and attempts to make it personal. They will start calling me a racist on this. Now, I've seen a list of his friends. I want to show you a list of my friends. And this is the one thing that I can't get past. These are the people that I believe, and I know personally, and I may not agree with everything that they say, but all of these people are my friends. And all of these people have said, he's very dangerous because these connections are real, and the connections to the Muslim Brotherhood are real. Who are they? Former director of the CIA, incredibly credible man, James Woolsey. Michelle Malkin, you know her. General Boykin, one of the most honorable men I know. Eric Steckelbeck, Patrick Poole, David Horowitz. This guy's got radar like nobody else. Frank Gaffney, sure, conspiracy theorist or former assistant, what was he, deputy of the Defense Department. Kind of a big deal. Joe Schmitz, this guy was the Inspector General of the Defense Department. These are not quacks or wacko birds. These are credible men, and there are credible women, and there are people who have called me, who have talked to me, who I have reached out to because I knew that they knew Grover. They've said, because he wields enormous power, please do not put my name on the chalkboard, but please do this show. You have to decide. Do you trust the people he trusts, or do you trust the people I trust? Back in a minute.
I got to know Grover in the mid-1990s. He approached me because I had just established the Foundation for Democracy in Iran. He was starting to get interested in that part of the world. I learned a number of years later, around 2000, 2001, that one of his top aides, a guy named Khalid Safuri, had been in Bosnia in the mid-1990s, working for a group that had subsequently been identified as an al-Qaeda front organization. So I took that to Grover and I said, hey, you know, Grover, there's something you might want to know in case you're not aware of it. And instead of listening or even responding, he just blew up, called me a racist, a bigot, an Islamophobe, and frankly, it was quite shocking behavior. He was never able to dispute the facts, never did dispute the facts. Anybody who criticizes political Islam, in his view, is an Islamophobe. That is simply wrong. People need to understand the distinction between political Islam and Islam or Muslims in general. Americans need to understand that people like Grover do not, and he's promoting a falsehood. He's promoting a lie.
I have a breaking news story for you right now. Grover Norquist has agreed to come on to the Glenn Beck Show immediately following this show at 5 o'clock. Go to theblaze.com. That is theblaze.com. Watch the show live. If you can't watch it live, watch the record of it. You must get informed. You must become aware, regardless of whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent. This man is influencing our politicians at the hands of Muslim Brotherhood agents and terrorists. This is J. Mark Campbell signing off. See you tomorrow.